Have you ever met someone who could shift the entire energy of a room without saying a word? They didn't speak loudly. They didn't argue. They simply held themselves with such control, such presence that everything around them responded. That's not magic. That's mindset. Motivation in its purest form. The kind that doesn't scream, but reshapes reality from within. This video isn't about yelling affirmations into the mirror. It's about reclaiming your energy, understanding your silence, and transforming the way you show up in a world that constantly demands a reaction. Because the truth is, your emotions have been manipulated by others for too long. Not because you're weak, but because you've been too available. Carl Jung called the path to wholeness individuation, the act of becoming fully authentically you. And the first step, stop giving the world unlimited access to your peace. If you've been searching for a deeper kind of mindset motivation, the kind rooted in boundaries, clarity, and self-respect, this is where it begins. The power of withdrawal. We've been taught that to be strong is to speak up, show up, and stay available. But there is a deeper strength, one that's quieter, harder, and far more misunderstood: the power to withdraw. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. You don't need to slam doors or make grand announcements. Sometimes the most radical act of self-respect is to say nothing at all. Just pause. Step back. Let the silence speak louder than your explanations ever could. When you withdraw from a toxic pattern, from emotional bait, from being everyone's savior, you break a cycle. The energy shifts. People who relied on your reactions start to scramble. They call you distant, say you've changed. But what's really happening is this: they're losing access to the emotional fuel you used to give away so easily. And that's the beginning of real power. Carl Jung taught that true growth happens not in reacting, but in observing. Not in pleasing, but in choosing. Withdrawal, when done consciously, is not weakness. It's mindset motivation in action. It's the moment you stop performing and start protecting. You were never meant to be an emotional emergency button for the world. You were meant to be whole. And sometimes becoming whole requires letting others deal with their own chaos without your energy holding them together. Think about how much of your strength has been lost to defending yourself, explaining yourself, proving your worth. Now imagine what would happen if you stopped, if you conserved that energy, if you let your silence become your boundary. That's the shift. People who used to control you through guilt, expectation, or subtle manipulation suddenly can't reach you because you've stepped into a space they no longer own your peace. This is not escape. This is return to yourself, to your center, to a version of you no longer driven by fear, but by discipline. And that's what mindset motivation is truly about. Not just pushing harder, but pulling back when necessary. Not just showing strength through action, but through restraint. When you master the power of withdrawal, you stop reacting and start leading. From within. Emotional availability is a trap. There's a silent lie you've been living under, that being emotionally available all the time makes you good, kind, strong. That the more accessible you are, the more worthy of love you become. But let's tell the truth. This emotional availability is a trap. It trains you to respond instantly, to comfort others even when you're breaking, to say yes while your spirit is screaming no. You've been programmed to feel guilty when you're unavailable, and that's exactly how you've been manipulated. Every message you reply to out of guilt, every conversation you tolerate just to avoid conflict, every time you put your needs aside to keep the peace, you chip away at your own center. And for what? Most people aren't in love with you. They're in love with what you provide: comfort, attention, validation. But the moment you stop performing, the moment you stop giving, watch how quickly their love changes. That's not real connection. That's conditional access. Carl Jung warned us of the dangers of living through the persona, the false self we wear to survive, to please, to be accepted. And that persona thrives on one thing: emotional availability. But here's the shift that comes with real mindset motivation. You learn to stop giving away your peace for approval. Being present all the time doesn't prove your loyalty. It reveals your boundaries or lack of them. And without boundaries, your energy becomes public property. You start confusing burnout with generosity. You begin to think that being emotionally drained is just the price of being a good person. But that's not love. That's self-neglect. And self-neglect always leads to resentment. Quiet at first, then heavy, then impossible to ignore. So what's the shift? Start being intentionally unavailable. Not rude, not cold, but clear. You don't need to explain your silence. You don't need to respond right away. You don't need to be available just because someone demands it. This is where mindset motivation becomes real, not in hyping yourself up for others, but in reclaiming your right to be selective with your time, your energy, your emotions. People will notice, some will call you distant, others might get angry. Let them. That's the cost of reclaiming your self-respect. Because the moment you stop giving from a place of guilt and start protecting from a place of wisdom, you become powerful and unshakable, psychic energy and reaction, addiction. Every reaction costs you something, not in time, not in words, but in something far more precious, your psychic energy. Carl Jung taught that the human psyche is like an energy system. And just like with money, if you don't know where it's going, it disappears. Most people don't lose their power because of one big decision. They lose it, one reaction at a time. That text you overanalyze, that comment you feel compelled to answer, that argument you replay in your head for hours, all of that is energy leakage. And the worst part? You've probably become addicted to it, addicted to reacting, addicted to being available. Addicted to proving your side, explaining your worth, justifying your silence. It's not your fault you were conditioned this way. Society rewards fast answers, immediate emotions, and total accessibility. But here's the truth. You were never meant to be a puppet for everyone else's triggers. Every time you react out of impulse, you give away control. You hand someone else the keys to your inner world. You let them set your emotional weather. That's not strength. That's surrender in disguise. The solution isn't to shut down or numb out. It's to build mindset motivation that runs deeper than the reflex. The kind that says, not everything needs a response. The kind that lets silence win, not as a defense, but as a decision. Start tracking where your energy goes. Ask yourself, is this response worth my peace? Am I reacting to be understood? Or because I'm afraid to be misunderstood? Who benefits from my emotional labor? Most of the time, it's not you, and that's why this matters. The more you leak energy into every small confrontation, the less power you have for the battles that actually count. So train yourself. Pause before you reply. Wait before you correct. Observe instead of absorb. This is what real control looks like. Not cold detachment, but conscious restraint. Mindset. Motivation isn't about waking up pumped. It's about conserving what matters so you can stay focused when it counts. Your peace is currency. Don't spend it on what can't return the investment. Protect your energy like your future depends on it, because it does. Breaking the projection game. You're not tired because you're doing too much. You're tired because you're holding up versions of yourself that were never yours to begin with. Carl Jung described projection as the unconscious act of assigning our own repressed feelings, fears, and desires onto others. But here's what people forget while others project onto you. You often agree to play the role. You become the caretaker, the peacemaker, the one who never complains. You say yes when you want to scream no, just to keep the connection. You wear the mask, not because it fits, but because it's familiar. Because disappointing others feels more terrifying than betraying yourself. And this is where the real damage begins. The more you react to others' expectations, the more you reinforce the image they've created of you. You're not just drained. You're imprisoned by every apology you don't owe, every over-explanation you give, every fake smile you wear just to avoid discomfort. But here's what no one tells you. You don't need to fight those projections. You just need to stop responding to them. When you choose not to react, The mask they placed on you starts to slip. Your silence becomes unsettling. Your stillness becomes a mirror. Suddenly, the person who once controlled the narrative no longer knows who you are. That's not weakness. That's power. And here's where mindset motivation plays its role. Not the external kind that tells you to show them who you are, but the internal kind that reminds you. You don't owe anyone a performance. The more you reclaim your energy, the more their illusions fall apart. They may call you selfish, distant, changed. That's fine. Let them feel the loss of control. Let them sit with the version of you they can't manipulate. Because when you break the projection game, something radical happens. You stop living in someone else's story. You stop editing yourself for their comfort. And finally, you start becoming the author of your own narrative. That is the essence of individuation. That is the path to freedom. So next time someone tries to define you, pause. Ask yourself, do I need to correct them, or can I just stop playing along? Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing, because your silence isn't passive, it's protective. And that silence, that's your new mindset. Motivation, from isolation to power, the sacred solitude of the strong. After you set boundaries, after you stop reacting, after you walk away from roles that drained you, what's left? Silence. At first, it feels empty, cold, unfamiliar. You begin to question. Have I gone too far? Did I push people away? Will anyone understand me now? But sit with that silence long enough and it starts to change. It stops sounding like loneliness and starts feeling like clarity. This isn't the silence of defeat. It's the silence of return. Return to your thoughts, your rhythm, your voice. A reconnection not with the world, but with the self that was buried under obligations, roles, and emotional exhaustion. What you're experiencing is not isolation in the traditional sense. It's sacred solitude. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the journey to becoming whole, not by adding more, but by shedding everything that is not authentically you. And to do that, you need distance, not to run from people, but to see clearly who you are without them. This kind of solitude doesn't weaken you, it sharpens you. You begin to notice how often your old self used to rush in to fix, to please, to explain. You realize how much of your energy was spent performing for people who never even saw the real you. And slowly, you stop performing. You stop chasing. You stop apologizing for needing space. And in that space, power grows. Not loud, ego-driven power, but still steady, unshakable power. The kind that can't be manipulated because it's rooted in self-awareness. This is the final stage of mindset motivation. Not the kind that gets you hyped, but the kind that keeps you grounded. It's the discipline to be alone when the world tempts you with noise. It's the courage to protect your energy even when others try to guilt you for doing so. And yes, you will lose people. But those who leave were only connected to the version of you that didn't know your worth. When that version dies, so do the false bonds. Let them. Because what you gain is far greater. Peace without performance. Self-worth without permission. Presence without explanation. You become whole, not because others complete you, but because you stop letting them divide you. So the next time you feel misunderstood in your silence, remember you're not being distant. You're just finally close to yourself. That's not loneliness, that's liberation. And that's mindset motivation at its highest level. If you've made it this far, let me tell you this. Your silence is no longer weakness. It is your weapon. Your solitude is no longer something to escape. It's your sanctuary. And your withdrawal is no longer confusion. It's clarity. What you've done by choosing to step back, protect your energy, and detach from manipulation is more than a mindset shift. It's a declaration. A quiet, undeniable announcement that says, I know who I am now. I no longer need to react to be real. Carl Jung believed that the path to wholeness wasn't paved with comfort. It was paved with confrontation. First with others, then with yourself. And what you've walked through in this journey is exactly that confrontation with the masks, the roles, and the emotional habits that once defined you. The lesson. You don't need to be constantly available to be valuable. You don't need to be reactive to be relevant, and you definitely don't need to be understood by everyone to be whole. Now I want to thank you not just for watching or listening, but for showing up for yourself in a world that constantly tries to pull you away from